Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live, and Merry Christmas. It's the 9th day of Christmas as we continue with the 12 days of Christmas. Thanks so much for being here with us. I don't know if I said it, but I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Did I say it? Have I said it twice now? I don't know. You can't say it too much. I mean, I'm Cy Kellett, your host. I'm glad you're here with us. Trent Horn is our guest. You know Trent because he is the husband of Laura Horn, who is the proprietor of... Oh, man, now it went... Hi, Trent. Tell me the name of your wife's podcast. It just went out of my head. Wait, no.
You have to think of what
Way
Laura
too far.
does.
Too far.
She goes too far.
Yeah, too far. With Laura Horn. All right. Hi, Trent.
Howdy, Cy.
Merry Christmas.
Merry 9th day of Christmas to you as well.
Thank you very, very much. Does your family like Christmas, or do you, because you have small children, I don't know how children feel about Christmas. Positive, negative?
It's kind of a mixed bag with my kids. I mean, they're very, very excited about Santa, but they cower in fear of Krampus. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag for them.
Maybe you should alert them to the fact that Krampus...
We are on the side of we are honest about Mr. Santa Claus, and we tell them about St. Nicholas.
Yeah.
And, we celebrate Christmas. I do think, though, if some people say, oh, I want the magic of Santa Claus at Christmas, you should be consistent and also have the magic of Krampus, who is the black, red-eyed, monstrous individual that comes for naughty little boys and girls.
Wait,
so
isn't
be
he
consistent?
Isn't he German or something? Like, where did we get Krampus?
It's part of that German lore back when he was Sinterklaas.
So he's actually black, like
racially
he has black
skin.
Oh
no, he has I think he's like a monster kind of goblin-esque creature. I just remember seeing paintings of him with like black skin and
I'm
like
uncomfortable with this now. I did not. Now I'm uncomfortable with the whole Krampus thing. I didn't know there was a Krampus until they made a movie, I think, about him.
Yes.
And now it seems like every year we have to have a movie about a bad Santa, ever since maybe the movie Bad Santa. But what is our thing with we can't?
Why do you think there's a bad Santa? This year there was a good one about how Santa saved a family from a home invasion robbery.
Maybe I should reframe that. A violent Santa.
It's called Violent Night.
This just doesn't seem right to me. I feel like somehow we're twisting something beautiful into we're making it some petty pop culture nonsense. I don't.
You don't want to see Die Hard, but with Santa? That's okay. That's your choice.
No, I don't know, and I could be wrong about that. I'm wrong about many things, but I'm now uncomfortable with Krampus, and I don't like all the bad Santas.
We are enjoying it, and the new year, of course, and the new studio. So we got all that fun stuff here at the Council of Trent. That's enjoyable.
The new studio, Trent. It looks fantastic. I forgot.
It does.
Because I have actually seen it before. It wasn't a surprise to me, so I didn't react the way I should have. But that's the new Trent Horn studio. Congratulations on that.
Well, thank you, Cy. It does bear a little of a passing resemblance to the Catholic Answers studio, which also looks very good.
Only because of Jesus. Because it's the same.
And
Jesus.
Here he is.
Yeah.
We've got wonderful icon behind me. I am excited to break the mold of just like every other podcast having a bunch of books behind you. I still have my books. Now they're in front of me instead of being behind me. So, which is fine.
That is the thing, though. The Catholic podcast with the books behind you.
Got to have all your books like you're in a lawyer's office or something. I always want to ask the lawyers, do you ever... Are these just decorative? I know all this stuff is online if you need to look it up. Like, do you ever open these books, actually? I mean, they are impressive, but... Yeah,
but I think you're probably right. I think the answer is no after a while, because you just use whatever lawyer service there is on the internet. January 2nd is the 9th day of Christmas. Trent Horn is our guest. His podcast is the Council of Trent. Very, very popular podcast, and for good reason. You should check it out at TrentHornPodcast.com, TrentHornPodcast.com. And here's the deal for today. Trent has patrons who keep him on the air, and we're very grateful to those patrons because we like having Trent on the air. And so he asked his patrons to submit questions, and this is the patron show. We got a whole bunch of questions from patrons of Council of Trent, which you, as I said, can find at TrentHornPodcast.com. And Trent, you ready to go with some questions from your patrons?
Let's do it. And definitely, I want to say thank you to all the patrons. It was your guys' support that allowed us to get a new studio, that's allowed the podcast to grow. I'm really excited to see where the podcast is going here in the new year. So, yeah, if you definitely want to continue to support us and help us to grow, definitely check out TrentHornPodcast.com.
And the best thing about that studio, by the way, is the shelves. Those shelves are magnificent looking. Those look like
They are.
handcrafted shelves. They're beautiful.
Like rich mahogany.
What is the figure right there, though? What is
Oh,
that?
let me reach back. Let me get the figure. These would be Muay Thai kickboxers.
Is that you and Edgar?
No, because one of them, they're the same size. If it was me and Edgar, there'd be this towering, gigantic man over this smaller person.
Over Trent.
Yes, that would be the difference there. So yeah, I'm going to play around with the background a little bit more.
So you
but definitely
personalized
keep
it a
this.
bit, though.
I did.
I like it. I like it. I like it very much. All right. Well,
I did.
here's your first patron question. This comes from James the patron. James the Greater, James the Less, and James the Patron. All the three famous Jameses. From God's perspective, what is the difference between someone losing their salvation and never having been truly saved?
Sure. And this comes up sometimes when we're discussing the issue of eternal security, or can a person ever lose his salvation? As I showed actually in my debate with James White several years ago, the mainstream belief in Christianity for 1,500 years was that it is possible for someone to come into communion with Christ and his church, to be saved, to be spiritually regenerate, and then to forsake his salvation. And that's something that many Protestants have believed even after the Reformation. Martin Luther believed it. It's something more that you find among Calvinists and Reformed circles, this idea of eternal security. And so a problem that arises for someone who defends eternal security, who says that a true Christian will never lose his salvation, is what do you do when you have someone who appears to be a true Christian, who appears to be saved, who then leaves the Christian faith, becomes an apostate, and dies and is unrepentant? How do you explain that? It seems like a true Christian lost their faith. And the explanation I usually hear is, oh, well, they were never really saved to begin with. And so I think the essence of the question is saying, well, is there really a difference between a person losing their salvation and never having been saved in the first place? Well, in one sense, there isn't a difference, because someone who was never saved and someone who has forsaken their salvation will end up in the same place. They will be apart from God for all eternity, though there may be differences about them. For example, there can be people in hell who have indelible spiritual marks on their souls, the marks left by baptism or the marks left by holy orders, for example, if they chose to reject God's gift of salvation even after receiving it. So in one sense, like when we think about from God's perspective, right, God has a timeless perspective. God sees every moment at once. He has the perfect simultaneous possession of unending life. That's what God's eternity is. So God has this perfect view of everything. So in one sense, he sees both of these kinds of people. They will end up with the same eternal fate. But on the other hand, there's certainly a difference from God's perspective, because God, in his omniscience, knows that some of these people were given grace and rejected it, and others did not. This goes back to the parable. Remember the parable that Jesus tells about the sower and the seeds, right? You have someone who scatters seeds abundantly throughout the field. Some of them will land on hard ground and be picked up. Others will land in shallow soil, and they'll sprout up, but then they'll wilt under the sun. So you have some people who will never accept the gift of salvation. You have others who will accept it. They'll grow in their faith, but they'll have a shallow foundation, and they'll wilt in the sun, or as the other part of the parable says, they'll be choked by the weeds, by the temptations of this life. So on the one hand, there isn't as much of a difference. Those two individuals will have the same eternal fate. But on the other, God certainly knows that some of them were his adopted sons and daughters, and that they tragically made shipwrecks of their faith, as St. Paul says in 1 Timothy 1:19, I believe. He talks about how there are those who have made a shipwreck of their faith. And so that's something we must always be concerned about.
Well, James, what a great question to get us started off with. The patrons of Trent Horn's podcast, the Council of Trent, are the questioners today. We've got a whole bunch of questions from patrons on this 9th day of Christmas. I've got a little Christmas clue to give you when we come back to get some prizes over at shop.catholic.com. We'll be right back with more patron questions for Trent on Catholic Answers Live.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
I want to talk to you about the importance of bringing the news to you every day. And we do that two ways on Catholic Connection. Firstly, we give you a newscast that I write and give to you to keep you up to date on what's happening in the world, in the church. And then we also do interviews daily to help you understand everything from a truly Catholic perspective.
Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo. Tomorrow morning, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. On this 9th day of Christmas, we are celebrating the Christmas season now. Just if you don't know, and this is not to be contentious, just to be informative, the Catholic liturgical year begins with Advent, which is the series of weeks leading up to Christmas. And then it goes into a second liturgical season, which is the Christmas season. And that's what we are in right now. And that's why you will hear Catholics often continue to wish each other Merry Christmas during this period. If they're really, really old-timey Catholics, they'll do it all the way up till February 2nd, the Feast of Candlemas. But in general, we have the 12 days of Christmas, and they stop on the Feast of the Epiphany. Trent Horn here, helping us celebrate this Christmas season by taking questions from his patrons. Did I explain that all correctly? The liturgical
Christmas tide.
Christmas tide
is the season of Christmas tide.
Yeah, I love those.
If you want to go all the way to Candlemas, it must be the season of Christmas tide.
Right. And those all come from, of course, kind of medieval English has all these wonderful phrases for all this stuff. So we are in Christmas tide right now.
Guaranteed.
All right, you got another. Here's another one from a patron of yours named Brett. Brett the patron. That's his name. If we discovered a drug/medicine that allowed you to live forever, would it be ethical to take?
Oh, this is a good question. Let's do the philosophical brainstorming here on this, because the church does not. So right off the bat, I would say the answer would be perhaps.
Oh, really?
I think I would probably even modify it to probably.
Wow.
Because, well, the church does not have a specific teaching on this question, right? Because there is no such drug or procedure that could accomplish this, to allow someone to have unending mortal life. Now, if you think about it, there is no, even if we create a drug or some kind of thing that keeps our mortal bodies alive indefinitely, you will not live forever in this state, because eventually Christ will return in his second coming. So it's not the case that science will be able to create a situation where you will have an infinite amount of mortal life. In fact, there's you look at the universe itself, it's going to entropy, it's going to break down. Even if you had something like that, eventually the entire universe would be a black void, except for you floating around in it, I guess, if you can even be sustained. So I think the real question is, would it be okay? Is it okay to extend your life? And the church says, yes, it is acceptable under certain conditions. You know, we don't say that people have to extend their lives under any condition. You could be at a point where you are near death and a medical procedure would be disproportionate. It would cause pain and suffering and not provide very much benefit to a patient. So you could decline it. But you can also do things to extend your life, and you should. You can eat right, you can exercise. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, or using technology to be able to do that. However, I think if we really did have technology that allowed us to live possibly unending mortal life, the church would deliberate about the ethical implications of that. And part of it may be, Cy, that we as finite human beings it may just always be bad for us to have that kind of existence. So it depends on what kind of existence we're talking about, right? When people say, oh, we're going to have something that allows you to live forever, a lot of times what they mean by that is we're going to create some technology to upload your brain to a computer. You know, where you can download your mind to a computer, upload it, and you're going to live in this server forever. But I'm interested to see what you think of that, Si. That's not me.
No.
That's a copy of me.
Right.
That's something that maybe, I'm sure
That's
if
a
you
simulacrum.
Ooh, fancy $64 word there.
Thank you.
I like it. But
Thank
yeah,
you. I brought my A game today.
it is a kind of facsimile, simulacrum, if you will. Because here's the thing. Let's say you did this procedure. You put the helmet on and you're going to get downloaded into this computer. And let's say they turn the computer on. It sounds like you. It types like you. Take the helmet off. Oh, I'm still here, actually. Am I in two places? No, I'm not in two places. So that's not me. So those kinds of, and that really is the only viable way that I've seen like transhumanists say that, oh, well, this is how you're going to live forever. We're going to be uploaded to a computer. No, that's just going to be a fancy file that can mimic me. And I'm sure if you fed the Council of Trent podcast to an artificial intelligence, it might be able to create a chatbot that sounds a lot like Trent Horn, but it's not Trent Horn. But suppose you had something that could keep our mortal bodies alive. Let's say you did have a magic pill. And now there's two different kinds of immortality if we look in fictional literature, right? Because immortality is a theme that's often discussed in fiction. One kind of immortality would be you have a body that does not decay, that does not suffer from disease or decay, but it could still be killed by some kind of a violent act. So that could allow you to live for a really long time unless your body suffers some kind of violence. The other kind of immortality would be that your body can always be reconstituted. It's like, you know, Wolverine's healing factor. There's nothing that can, you will always continue to have mortal life. Well, honestly, if somebody offered me something like that, I would say there's so many implications that would be so problematic. Like I, as a human being, it would just warp my human experience, and it wouldn't be good for my human flourishing. And if I thought about it more, and I think if the church entered in on that, they would say it would be wrong because it would contradict our flourishing. I'll give you a few examples of this. Imagine if you, let's say you could live another 1,000,000 years, right? And you took this. Think about what's going to happen. First, your human relationships would be very stunted, right? Human relationships would feel, they would be as consequential as your relationship with like a fly, you know, because like a fly lives like what, a few days, right? And then there's some flies that have very short lifespans. Think about if you live after hundreds of thousands of years, all the human beings around you, they're only with you for decades. You'd feel very detached from other human beings, but as a human being, we are social animals. Our relationships with other human beings are very important. But if you lived for millions of years, you couldn't really form attachments to human beings. They would pop in and out of existence. A wife you were married to for 80 years would be like some lady you met on the bus a week ago. It would be so fleeting in that regard. Number two, human beings are going to continue to evolve, right? We're going to continue to change and adapt. Language, the way we speak. I mean, look at hominids from tens of thousands of years ago, right? And they look different from us now. Even now, we see the human beings, our facial features, anatomical features, they change over time. But let's say you're unchanging for like 1,000,000 years. You, Si, in 1,000,000 years would be like, you know, a caveman living today. You might not even have the precise, your mouth might not change as other human beings, so you might even be unable to communicate with other people. So I love that people have dived into this to think about the questions related to immortality. Oh, here's another problem. Let's say you're completely indestructible. What happens if you're in a parking garage and it collapses on top of you?
Don't even, I hate these. These will keep me up at night if I start thinking about this.
And you're
You'll freak me
indestructible
out.
immortality.
Oh, come on.
Indestructible immortality.
Oh, this is
And they
horrible.
decide, guess what? There
This
are
is
no
the
more
worst.
survivors.
I'm getting stressed.
And
I'm sweating right now.
And they pave over it with a nice park, and you're underneath it.
And you're like Richard III
Blinking.
under that. Remember, Richard III was buried under a parking lot in England? But you're still alive for all those
But
years.
you're still alive. So that's why I would say that if somebody, like I said, the church hasn't offered, a teaching. I don't know. There is no teaching on this question because there's no technology like this. But if I had to ruminate on what makes us capable of human flourishing, what is ultimately good for us, life is good for us, but we were not made for unending mortal life. We were made for unending eternal life with God. And so I think that the risks would far outweigh any benefit of having unending mortal lifespan. And so ultimately it would be, at the very least, unwise and probably immoral to engage in that kind of behavior. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that was a very good answer, actually. I would certainly not take that pill. Not a chance I would take that pill. And primarily because I'm only 58 right now, and I already hate the new music. If I live to be 1,000, what am I going to think of the music then?
It's just a bunch of like horns and cats scratching.
Right. And I am of this age now. Every restaurant I go to, it sounds like they're playing the music so loud. I feel like, why do I don't even need music. I'm having a sandwich. I don't need music with my sandwich. Please just turn it off. But it's always really loud. I couldn't take it. If I lived to be 1,000, I would be so out of place. I'm already out of place. I think
the Bible is right that if you are a strong man, you can live even to 70 or 80 is a full life given to one by the Lord, even to 100. But unending life. Now the Bible does talk about patriarchs and others who were sustained in the Old Testament. This might be symbolic language. It could also be literal, but even there, they lived maybe hundreds, centuries. And if God sustains you, gives you a particular mission, that's one thing. Well, the question just said if a drug or a medicine. If God said, I need you around for a while,
okay,
that's going to change
different.
The game a bit for me.
He'll
so
give
the
you
only
the grace
examples I
to
can
deal
think of
with
of
the
people who
music.
lived for centuries might be people in Genesis 5, if that isn't symbolic. But that's the gift of God to them, not just something that we created that becomes a Pandora's box that we've opened and wished we hadn't.
Yeah. Plus, there's the thing about, like, at a certain point, you do just kind of want to see Jesus. Like, I don't want to...
Yes.
Like, how long do I want to delay this? I would like to see him, you know?
And that's a beautiful witness, Sai, when you meet people who are elderly, who are preparing for death, and who are full of faith.
Yeah.
That
right.
when they are full of faith and they have lived a life for Christ and for others, they are satisfied with the life they have lived, and they have so much peace. And they usually say things like, "I'm ready to go home now."
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'm ready to go home. I've lived the life God wanted me to live. And it's just such a wonderful example of faith to see that from someone who is prepared to receive that. Though it's also a wonderful example from someone, let's say you have somebody who's more my age, who has contracted a terminal illness, who is full of faith and still derives their hope from God's promises.
Yeah.
That's something we all should prepare ourselves to do.
Right. And there are people like that. I've known them myself, and they're extraordinary people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we should kind of aim for that mindset, I think, to be at peace and hopeful about meeting the Lord. All right. That was a great question, Brett. So far, I really I like your patrons, Trent.
They're great. They're great.
This one comes from Arnaldo the patron.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. For those of us who are interested in a more serious study of theology, would you recommend studying at an online university? If so, which one? P.S. Not married, but already having a full-time job in another area. Oh, I see. So he's not free to move, in other words. Arnaldo's saying, I can't just pick up and go to whatever university you might recommend. Got it. Okay, Arnaldo.
Well, this was the position that I was in, Sai, when I pursued my master's degree in theology. So at the time I had graduated Arizona State University. I was traveling the country doing pro-life mission work. So I was doing that full time, but I wanted to continue my education. So I enrolled in the Franciscan University of Steubenville's distance master's in theology program, though that was back in, I want to say, about 2009. And definitely old school. They sent me a binder full of CDs to listen to, and I would take the CDs into my computer. And the CDs had data files on them. So they would send you the data files on CD-ROM, put the CD in my computer, and I would download all of the lectures to my iPod Shuffle. This little Shuffle that kids remember the Shuffle?
I know the Shuffle, yeah.
It was just a little square, and I wear it on my arm when I was working or exercising. And I would listen to the lectures on my little Shuffle. And so that was my distance rather than online education. But nowadays, I think all of the programs have interactive online elements to them. And I would definitely recommend that because I was in a position where I was working full time. I wanted to get a master's degree. And so what was nice was that I just set aside, and I was unmarried, like Arnaldo. So I set aside half of my income to pay for the degree as I was doing it. So I didn't have to get into any student debt. Now, that was back when you could get a $400 studio apartment in the middle of Kansas. So, I had some things helping me in that regard. But I definitely enjoyed that. I definitely recommend it to others. If you're going to get, especially studying theology, avoid student debt as much as you can. I have a few other tips on that as well, and we'll definitely share them with you when we come back.
All right, Arnaldo, hang on, and we'll get the other side of that answer from Trent Horn, who has not taken the infinite life pill. We've only got him for a short time, so let's enjoy him while we've got him. Right back with more questions for Trent on Catholic Answers Live.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Merry ninth day of Christmas. Again, I'm Cy Kellett, your host. It's Catholic Answers Live. Trent Horn is our guest, and all of our questions are coming from patrons of Trent Horn's podcast, The Council of Trent, which you can find at trenthornpodcast.com. Arnaldo, the patron, has a question about studying theology online, and we're going to go back to Trent's answer, but I have to read this ad because I was supposed to read it before, and I didn't, and it's the clue to how you can get prizes at shop.catholic.com, so I got to give it to you if you want to get prizes over at shop.catholic.com. Each day of Christmas, we'll be reading a clue leading you to a book title at shop.catholic.com. If you're one of the first 5 to locate the product and use the attached promo code, you will get it for free. Today is the 9th day of Christmas. Day 9 is the 9 ladies dancing. Here is your clue. Red-nosed Rudolph and reindeer glancing at light and jolly 9 ladies dancing. Happy hunting at shop.catholic.com. Here's that clue again. Red-nosed Rudolph and reindeer glancing at light and jolly 9 ladies dancing. Check it out. Find your book at shop.catholic.com. Arnaldo wanted to know if you would recommend studying online for theology and if you would recommend anywhere to study online theology for a master's degree. Go ahead.
Sure. So I was saying that I was in a situation similar to Arnaldo, that I was studying my first master's degree in theology when I was working full time. I wasn't married. It was a great way to use my time. Now, my social life definitely got curtailed. People made fun of me because nights and weekends I did school and I worked during the day, but I was able to get a master's degree without going into debt. And so I think that's very helpful. and I would recommend others, online master's degree programs are an excellent way to be educated, to get a degree, and avoiding student debt. So I highly recommend that. And now it's really expanded. So, I mean, when I did it, I hadn't really hardly any interaction with other students or faculty. But now I've done other programs since then. I got an online master's from Holy Apostles College in philosophy, a distance master's from the University of Mary in bioethics. And there I'm able to interact, do live Zoom meetings with students and classmates. And so there are a lot of great programs. So I would just mention there's 3 right off the top of my head. I'll add a 4th. So Franciscan University of Steubenville, Holy Apostles College and Seminary, University of Mary, the Augustine Institute. And if you look at a lot of really solid Catholic colleges, many of them offer online elements as well. And so I do say then the question, he says, well, for the serious study of theology, I will say this, the question of whether your study of theology will be serious does not depend on what program you're in per se. It depends on whether you're going to do the effort to do the studying. Granted, there are some programs that will make you read 1 million books for homework and for assignments. But if you don't want to learn the material, you can just cram, get through the tests, and then forget all of it, just as people do in all other kinds of courses. Or there are other programs that might be lighter in an academic workload. And honestly, that can be helpful if you're trying to learn and get a degree while you have something like a full-time job. I would say that your ability to have a serious study resides in you voluntarily choosing to read the primary sources, to read the recommended reading that professors offer, to ask questions, to seek advice, and you can get all of that in an online program. So I definitely recommend them.
Arnaldo the patron, thanks very, very much for that question. I hope that answer was helpful to you. Trent Horn is our guest, and thousands of people know him as the husband of Laura Horn. And Christopher the patron asks this: what are all your thoughts? He wants all of your thoughts. What are all of your thoughts on Too Far with Laura Horn? Christopher.
It hasn't gone far enough yet. No, there's always room. There's room to go. No, so my wife started this YouTube channel a few months ago, and I'm very proud of her that she has entered into a niche for Catholics that hasn't really been fully developed, and that's just short form funny videos, because a lot of Catholics online tend to take themselves a little bit too seriously. Being online, an online Catholic is often kind of an irritating experience, I guess is the word I would use. But she's provided a place where Catholics can kind of poke fun at themselves and laugh, and that's her YouTube channel, Too Far with Laura Horn. I help out to make the videos, and I appear in them every so often, and it's a ton of fun, and I'm very proud of her and what she's doing in that regard to show that a Catholic woman can be out there, can be entertaining, and yeah, just let people have a laugh. It's good for our faith to have a laugh once in a while.
I have to say, Christopher, I disagree completely. I think it's horribly disrespectful, and I'm going to be right. I'll be writing a strongly worded letter, Trent.
You don't want to say that because we still have to film another video where Laura impersonates Catholics, and you're on the list.
No, but you told me she's only going to do celebrity Catholics, so I feel safe from Laura. Well, plus, I think she's so funny, Trent. She's really this like naturally funny person. Some people express themselves in a way that is just funny. You're just and
it's genuine. This is what you see in the videos is what you get. This is who she is. So.
Yeah, I really like her office.
Yes, her office is the typical homeschooling mom's office, which is just the laundry room.
Yeah. Of course I'm kidding. I think what she does is great work, especially when she really nails someone that I don't like that much. Like, I don't want to name any names, but nobody really likes Father Mike Schmitz. Nobody. That's.
I remember when I spoke at the Catholic Answers Focus Conference.
I'm sorry, but someone's going to think I'm serious. He's the sweetest guy in the world.
I like Father Mike, except when we both do breakout sessions and we're in competition with each other.
Yeah, right.
And there's not a single female left in my session because they all want to go and listen to Father Mike. So
yeah, he's all right. Now I went too far, but
you went too far.
Laura at least does it in a funny way. Thanks, Christopher the patron, for that question. This one comes from Elizabeth, the patron. Are there any Catholic or Christian TV shows you like for your kids?
Not really. Then this is a call for, and I know I'm probably going to get some strongly worded letters. Well, why don't you like this? Or why don't you like that? I've heard a lot of good things about The Chosen. And I don't even know, though, if it's really like necessarily something for kids that I would show them. Plus, I also have my concerns about some of the theological liberties they take. But overall, I hear it's a good show. But I'm not in a place to recommend it because I haven't watched it. I mean, there's not... I've seen like VeggieTales and other Bible cartoons, and I hate how kiddie they are. I want them to take the Bible with some seriousness without going over a child's head. I've seen some other Catholic programming. I think there's one with like a friar and a little lamb puppet that's not always, the audio isn't always synced up. I just can't get into it. The only one that I really show my kids, and I wish there were more of them, I think there's only 13 episodes, so you can find them on YouTube, is The Greatest Adventure Stories from the Bible. It's produced by Hanna-Barbera, the people who made the Jetsons and the Flintstones. They were made from 1985 to 1992, and it's about a group of young archaeologists that get sent back in time to the time of Bible stories. But the voice acting is awesome. They have people like Ed Asner, the old man from Up, playing Joshua. You've got, I think Vincent Price is Herod the Great.
That is a great choice. Nice.
Yeah. So I mean, it's the voice acting is wonderful. They take care in telling the stories. Greatest adventure stories in the Bible. You can find them on YouTube, maybe on eBay, but you can usually watch them there. Otherwise, I haven't found too much. If anyone would like to recommend it to me, go to trendhorn.com/contact. And if you say, hey, this is a great one for kids to watch, send it to me. I will listen. One I might introduce my kids in a year or two. I mean, they could watch it now. I don't know if they would like it. It's called Bible Man. You ever heard of Bible Man?
I don't think I have.
So
No.
Bible Man is an evangelical live-action TV series about a guy who, I don't know the whole story about him, but I've only seen clips of Bible Man. The intro is him, and he's in the rain, and he's throwing all the letters out of his suitcase because his life is worthless. His life is so purposeless. And then he discovers the Bible and becomes a superhero. So he talks about the Bible. He wears this superhero suit, and he often uses a kind of lightsaber to fight other people. So I'm like, all right, we'll see if my kids can enjoy that. But no, I haven't found too much, unfortunately.
I would like to correct you on one point. Ed Asner, you don't say
Go
Ed
ahead.
Asner, the old man from Up. You say Ed Asner, Lou from the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Who doesn't? Come on, Trent. Thanks, Elizabeth. I'd love to hear some suggestions of good kid stuff that's out there too. I imagine that the the folks at the Family Theater, what's Father Peyton, that group must have some stuff. Somebody recommend some stuff to us, because it would be good to have stuff to be able to recommend.
It is. So if you send it along my way, and I'll review it and give it a look.
All right. Next question comes from patron Mark. Mark the patron says this: Howdy, Trent. What are your thoughts on Douay Rheims onlyism, specifically in light of King James onlyism? They are similar in a sense that both sides insist on using a specific translation, that all others are corrupt. But the reasons held by each camp are very different. And while neither case is particularly compelling to me, it does seem like each respective side is gaining adherents. Love the show. God bless. Mark.
Well, thank you, Mark. And yes, there are a group of Protestants and a group of Catholics that have a very extreme view about which particular translation of the Bible is appropriate to read or is even divinely inspired. So among certain Protestants, among more fundamentalists, you will have those who will say that the authorized version, the 1611 King James Version, is the only appropriate Bible translation to read, or the only one that is divinely inspired, actually, and that the others are not actually inspired. That would be more of a fringe view. And it's based on the idea that only certain manuscripts are the ones that we should trust. And there's a counterpart to that in the Catholic world among those who is subscribed to what's called Douay-Rheims onlyism. So the Douay-Rheims translation of the Bible is a vernacular translation into English from the Latin Vulgate. and when I meet Catholics that like the Douay-Rheims, I think most of them, they wouldn't say it's the only translation allowed to read. They might say it's their favorite translation, and that's fine. People have different translations that are their favorite. For me, there are translations that I enjoy reading for personal study because they sound, they're very close to the original text in the wording. But there's other translations, like I have Bible passages that I've memorized for personal devotion from translations that use more modern language because it's just easier to remember. It's not as wordy. It's easier to wrap your head around without using more awkward English words to translate what the original author was saying. So people have different translations they like, and that's fine. But to say that the only appropriate Catholic translation, or that there is an official Catholic translation, that would be problematic because the Church does not have one official translation of the Bible. Now, it's true that the Latin Vulgate has a pride of place. And what some Catholics will say is, well, you have popes, you have Catholic authorities saying throughout history that the Latin Vulgate is free from all error. And that's true. Now, when I say Latin Vulgate, by the way, we don't have the same Latin Vulgate that St. Jerome wrote 1,600 years ago. That's why Pope St. John Paul II approved the translation of the Nova Vulgata, the new Latin Vulgate translation, because we have newer ancient manuscripts now to help us understand where errors may have crept in the copying of St. Jerome's original Latin Vulgate. So the Latin Vulgate does have an important place, especially within the Western Church. But that doesn't make it the official translation of the Bible because you have very old manuscripts, very old translations in other parts of the Church. For example, in the eastern part of the Church, where you have like the Maronite rites, for example, these other Eastern rites, you have the Peshitta, which is a 5th century Syriac translation of Scripture. And we can use that with Greek manuscripts and compare that to the Latin Vulgate and see where in the Latin Vulgate you might have a translation that's not as good. Because the problem is there are people who will say, well, why wouldn't you just use the Vulgate of the Douay-Rheims because the Church says it's free from error? Well, true, it's free from theological error and moral error. If you read it, it doesn't have a heresy in it. But that doesn't mean that it's always the best translation. For example, the Latin Vulgate has a verse in it that now we're almost certain was not in the original letter of St. John. So in 1 John, there is a part called the Johannine Comma, where it talks about the three witnesses, and it references these three witnesses are the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And it's a very Trinitarian verse. So that would be great to show, hey, here's the Trinity explicit in one Bible verse. But now in our studies of ancient manuscripts, we've seen that this particular verse from 1 John, it's not in any of the earliest manuscripts. It arrived later, so it's not original to the text, so it's no longer in Bibles, even though it's in the Vulgate. So this is an error. I mean, it's not a theological error. You read it, you believe in the Trinity. That's great. But it is not a good translation because that's not what was there originally. So a good text that I would recommend to read on biblical translations and what the Church teaches about them, if you look at Pope Pius XII's 1943 encyclical Divino Afflante Spiritu, here's a part in section 16 that I find interesting, where he says that St. Jerome strove earnestly to achieve, as far as the science of his time permitted. To this also aspired with untiring zeal and no small fruit, not a few of the great exegetes, biblical interpreters, of the 16th and 17th centuries, although the knowledge of languages then was much less than at the present day. In like manner, therefore, ought we to explain the original text, which, having been written by the inspired author himself, has more authority and greater weight than any, even the very best translation, whether ancient or modern. This can be done all the more easily and fruitfully if to the knowledge of languages be joined a real skill in literary criticism of the same text. So notice what Pope Pius XII is saying here. What is the inspired text is the original text. What Luke wrote in Greek, what the Old Testament authors wrote in Hebrew or Aramaic. And we use the science of textual criticism to reconstruct that original text. That is the inspired text, more so than even the best translations. But we still need translations. Most people can't read the ancient languages. Even if you can, you may not understand the context involved in them. And so that's why the Catholic biblical scholars are free to pursue a variety of translations, though they require the permission of the church before they formally publish something like a translation of the Bible.
What a great question, Mark. We got to take a break, though. We'll take that break, be right back with more patron questions for Trent Horn on Catholic Answers Live.
Hello, this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Keep your dial tuned to Catholic Answers Live.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
One of the reasons we should go to Mass is because, if you look in the Catechism, you will see the fruits of Holy Communion. And these are remarkable things that we can receive at every Mass that we attend. We encounter the risen Lord, and He shares something of His divine life and love with us.
The Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, live from the EWTN Chapel, every morning, 8 Eastern, on EWTN Radio and Television.
Catholic Answers Live. Trent Horn is our guest on this 9th day of Christmas. All the questions coming from his patrons, and we'll get right back to that. But each day of Christmas, we'll be reading a clue leading you to a book title at shop.catholic.com. If you're one of the first 5 to locate the product and use the attached promo code, you will get it for free. Today is the 9th day of Christmas, as I said. That's the 9 ladies dancing, and here's your clue. Red-Nosed Rudolph and Reindeer Glancing at Light and Jolly 9 Ladies Dancing. You can find that clue and its attendant free books at shop.catholic.com. Here's the clue again. Red-Nosed Rudolph and Reindeer Glancing at Light and Jolly 9 Ladies Dancing. Trent, this next question comes from your patron, Ed. Patron Ed asks, please discuss how a Catholic should evangelize a Protestant brother or sister and at what point this becomes inappropriate proselytizing. If a baptized Catholic now identifies as Protestant, should our approach be different than for a lifelong Protestant?
Well, I think that any approach we take in sharing our faith, there should be a commonality with who we're addressing. And I think that in order to be true evangelists rather than engaging in proselytism, we have to understand that we are engaging a person, not a project. And if we look at it in that way, I think that can help us to find a balance here. So Pope Francis and also Pope Benedict XVI often made distinctions between evangelism and proselytism. We oftentimes think that they just mean the same thing, sharing your faith. In one sense, they do, but the word proselytism has developed a connotation of using coercive or manipulative tactics in order to help someone to become Catholic, like promising certain temporal goods, if they choose to become Catholic, for example, or as I said, using other manipulative tactics, browbeating them, dragging someone kicking and screaming into the kingdom, if you will, rather than accompanying them and helping to lead them into the kingdom. So that's something we want to avoid, but we want to be true evangelists. We want to share our faith. If we love our faith, we'll share it with other people. And so another bad attitude of proselytism is thinking, the reason I want to share my faith is I want to get as many converts as possible. I want the team to be as big as possible, and I want to have the reputation of getting the most converts. That would be treating someone as a project. That would be proselytism, not true evangelization. True evangelization would say that I want every single person to know the love of Jesus Christ and the church that he's established. And so what I want to do is to share my faith with them. And I'm going to be attentive to their particular needs in the relationship that I have with them. And I'll always use prudence in my relationship with them. So for example, if I'm with a coworker and we're supposed to be working on a project right at the office and we're under a deadline, that might not be the best opportunity to share my faith. But maybe when we're outside of work, I could say, hey, do you want to come with me to this Advent service that I'm going to? Or do you want to come to this talk they're having at my church? I think it'd be really neat and you'd be interested in it. And extending invitations to Catholic events and services is helpful. I think asking questions, like if something Catholic comes up in the news or you're doing something like Bible in a Year, if someone asks you what you're doing, you can say, oh, I'm listening to Catechism in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz. I don't know, have you ever read the Catechism of the Catholic Church? It's actually really interesting. Even if you're Catholic, you haven't gone into it as much. It's fascinating. Asking people questions. Or you do Bible in a Year. Like, when's the last time you read the Bible? Or if, what church did you go to? If they're Protestant and never been Catholic, asking them about what they believe. See, right there, people like to talk about themselves. So I think at the bare minimum, we can ask people questions about what they personally believe about spiritual matters, and then what do they think about Catholicism? And then from there, maybe we could correct a misunderstanding or ask them a question that challenges them. And I think if you follow that gradual path and always leave the door open for conversations without browbeating people, you can have a good opportunity to engage and to share the Catholic faith. But you should also be respectful. If somebody says, I don't really want to talk about that right now, just to say, okay. Or if they say, I don't want to talk about this kind of stuff, you can say, okay, yeah, that's fine. If you have a question, just let me know. You want to have that balance, especially in the workplace, where you want to avoid things that could look like you are acting in a way that might be unethical. If you're a supervisor and you have those under you who are working, you don't want to make it seem like there's a pressure for someone who works under you, for example, to adopt your faith or something like that. So you always want to be above board when you're sharing your faith with others. But I think that you should just follow the same protocols that would be allowed for people in your office or your workplace to share what they're passionate about in other non-religious areas. If you can have casual conversations about movies or politics or other contentious issues, you should be free to share your religious beliefs in a similar way.
Thank you, Ed, very much for that question. I am so fascinated by the next question. I don't think you're going to be able to get it before the top of the hour, though. What do you want to do? Like this, I can tell you the question, but I really want you to give I'm so interested in what your answer is going to be on this next question.
Well, why don't we put a pin in it then, because we could talk a lot about this particular issue. I have another question here from our friend Arnaldo. I think would be an easy way to round it out. If someone wants to learn more about Catholicism, where could they start? Well, right there. I would say the Catechism of the Catholic Church, but if you're intimidated by a brick of a book, read the compendium of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And, not to be self-serving, I would recommend my book, Why We're Catholic, as a nice start. I wrote it as a way to have an easy explanation of the Catholic faith that you could give to anybody. Why we're Catholic, and then if you want to go deeper into what the church teaches, I would definitely recommend the compendium of the Catechism of the Catholic Church as just a nice summary. But the Catechism is something, I know it looks thick, but it's made of a bunch of little small paragraphs that aren't that hard to read. And you can get through it bit by bit. So those would be a few resources that I would recommend. So I don't know, Sai, if you have other recommendations.
No, I would. I always recommend Why We're Catholic, the most popular book ever written for Catholic Answers Press by our guest today, Trent Horn. I just so people know what the question is I didn't get into. There's a question about how we can trust the memories of the apostles given modern insights into and theories about memory and how unreliable memory can be. So,
Sai,
yeah.
you already told everybody that was the question. You already told them that.
I don't remember.
Yeah,
did I
you already
forget?
told them. Did you forget already?
Oh my gosh, I'm so confused right now.
Or maybe our memories are more reliable than even the experts think. We'll talk about that when we come back.
Maybe out of the two of us, one of our memories is more reliable than the experts think. Well, that seems to be a more likely theory. All right, we'll take this break. It'll be a very quick one, and then we'll be back to continue our raucous celebration of the 9th day of Christmas with a whole bunch of cool questions from Trent's patrons. The patrons are patrons of the Council of Trent. That's Trent's podcast. And if you want to find Trent's podcast, you can find it at TrentHornPodcast.com. TrentHornPodcast.com. Right back with more questions and more answers from Trent Horn on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Merry Christmas on this 9th day of Christmas. And in some places around the world, January 6th is the big day. So there are lots of folks anticipating getting their gifts on January 6th. I know it used to be the big day in Mexico. I don't know if that's the case anymore. It was the big gift-giving day, you know. I know in some places, in some areas where the Orthodox live, January 6th is the big day. You probably know more about that than I do, Trent, but I know there are still people anticipating their gifts, and to those people, good luck. I hope it all goes really, really well for you. I hope nobody forgot. No, they didn't forget, kids. I'm only kidding. Sorry about that. Trent Horn, our guest, he's the proprietor of The Council of Trent. That's his podcast, and you can find the podcast at TrentHornPodcast.com. Thanks for coming back again, Trent.
Oh, of course. Glad to be here, Cy.
Do you know about that January 6th thing? Like, in some places, that's the big gift-giving day, because that's kind of the day that that's the day we commemorate the giving of the gifts that the wise men gave to Jesus.
I am all in favor of taking holy days and making them opportunities to be able to exchange gifts. I still don't know why we haven't brought Michaelmas back, September 29th.
What is that?
I feel like...
I know. Okay, yeah, right. All right.
The feast celebration of St. Michael, Michaelmas. I believe it's September 29th, because that's a nice period right there, because, we have... I don't know, the only holiday we had before that was Labor Day and Memorial Day. They just don't feel like holidays. They just feel like excuses to not be at work, to have the 3-day weekend.
Yeah.
You don't get that holiday spirit from them like you do with between 4th of July and Halloween. I feel like we could use another holiday. I think Michaelmas is a good contender.
You and I are on the same page here. As a matter of fact, I think just in general, we don't have enough holidays. And people always I don't know what it is about Americans, but we get mad when the federal government declares another holiday. Like we need another holiday. Yeah, we need another holiday. I do. I don't know about you, but yeah, I would like another holiday.
And it should be something that we have traditions and fun and festivity, not something that's just an excuse to not go to work or school. That's what Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day has become. I'm opposed to both of them because there's no festivities.
No, I think we should have Indigenous Peoples Week. I think we should, but it should not be associated with Columbus Day. Indigenous peoples' lives and histories have nothing to do with Columbus. Get over it. Separate the two. But let's have a whole week where we have festivities all week, and I know the agricultural products. Go ahead.
Could we do Viking Day to celebrate when the Vikings got here first? Like Eric the Red Day?
They didn't make it to America. They only made it to Canada. So the Canadians can have Viking Day, but you cannot.
Oh, they can.
No. After the invasion,
dang it, they get all the best holidays. They get Viking Day. They get Boxing Day.
I know.
They have so many good ones.
Boxing Day is awesome.
It's like,
yes.
Yeah, but in any case, we could use a bit more there, and that we got a fall lull, I feel like.
I gotta say, I feel like the Native American people are falling down on the job. They need to advocate for a holiday. We need a Native American holiday. I don't know enough about Native American culture to say which day it should be, but I'll vote for it. Whatever day you want, I'll vote for it. We just don't have it.
It gets me another holiday. Let's do it.
Well, I do have an enlightened self-interest here, but I think it is enlightened.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Here comes a question for you. From one of your patrons named Benjamin.
Mm-hmm.
He's the youngest of 12 sons. And he says this: Elizabeth Loftus proved that our memory is often unreliable. How do we know that the memory of the apostles, how do we know that the memory of the apostles was reliable?
Yes, this is something that critics of the New Testament have been proposing for a while now, of taking our modern studies of memory and then using that to cast doubt on the historical reliability of the Gospels. Because even if you take an early date for the Gospels and say they were written before the destruction of Jerusalem, between the years 50 and 70, for example, and many scholars will take a later date. They'll say that maybe Mark was written in the 60s and the other Gospels were written later in the 70s, 80s, or 90s. Even if you take between the years 50 and 70, the earliest you have now is 20 to 40 years after the events took place. So the question is, how reliable are the recollections that are involved, and how should that relate to our faith and understanding of it? And Benjamin references the work of Elizabeth Loftus. I think she's published a book called Eyewitness Testimony, and has been used in very high-profile court cases to cast doubt on the reliability of eyewitness testimony. And there certainly is a place for that. But I think we have to make a distinction between eyewitness testimony in court cases and the kind of eyewitness testimony that would have been the foundation of the accounts in the Gospels. So what Loftus and others have shown is that and this is difficult because a lot of times in criminal cases, eyewitness testimony is really powerful, right? If you have somebody who points and he says that's the guy, is the guy here in the courtroom today that broke into the store. Can you point to him? Let the record show they pointed to Mr. Cy Kellett, whoever they pointed to. I always love that in dramas, by the way.
Yeah. Right.
You don't have them say it. They dramatically point. Let the record show they pointed to this person. But we've done studies to show that eyewitness testimony can be compromised in a lot of ways. But it's not really directed to what happened, with the Gospels. So, for example, if someone is the victim of a crime, and they are attacked by another person, it's often a very fleeting encounter. Or if someone is asked to be an eyewitness in court, it's usually because of something they saw for a very short amount of time, like somebody breaking into the store that looks like Cy Kellett. Even if it's an attack or other things that, usually people will say to the police, oh, it happened so fast. And especially if the attacker is someone of a different race than the victim, and they have a weapon. When someone has a weapon in an attack, the victim tends to focus on the weapon rather than on the attacker's face. So when you have all of these elements put together, it can show that eyewitness testimony can often be very unreliable in picking out this person did it versus that person did that. But what we have with the Gospels is what Loftus in her own research has shown is that repetition is key for eyewitness testimony being reliable. So if you see or hear something over and over and over again, as a human being, you're more likely to imprint that, to be able to retain that. Events that had a very impactful moment in one's life, you're able to remember even ancillary details. So they did an eyewitness study of people who were in Denmark when they were liberated after the end of World War II, and interviewed them 50 years later, and they could still remember what the weather accurately was that day, for example, when they were liberated. So repetition, when you have similar interests, ethnicities, and strong pair bonds, that increases the reliability of eyewitness testimony. I'll give you an example of why I think so. At the basement level, just saying the foundation of our faith is the belief that Jesus Christ died and rose from the dead. How would eyewitness testimony relate to that? Cy, can you remember however many years it was ago that you graduated high school? I'm going to guess what, 8? Let's see here.
I didn't graduate high school in the year 8. Is that what you were saying?
No, 8 years ago I was trying to be flattering, Cy.
Oh, I thought you thought I graduated in the year 8.
Year 8 AD at Jerusalem High School. No, let's say for
1982.
1982.
Yeah.
All right. So 40 years. Your 40th anniversary.
Yeah, I went to my 40th reunion.
There were people there? Now I just took a sharp left turn.
There were no people. There were no people. It was just...
You're the only one who made it.
And people sent cards and letters, said, my hip hurts, I can't come.
But do you remember 40 years ago, like at your high school grad, do you remember, talking to a really good friend or spending time with someone, and all you'd have to remember is you talked to a specific person and they were alive?
Yes, I do remember those things. Yeah.
Yes. And then that's just what we would just need from the apostles to have the foundational bedrock of the Christian faith, which is the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. We also have to remember when the apostles and others who are writing the gospel accounts, it's not like the resurrection happened. They went off and got another job, and 40 years later, they decided, hey, I think I'm going to write about this crazy stuff that happened to me 40 years ago, 30 years ago. They were involved in an active preaching mission. And so I remember once I was with student government in our high school, I had to go to different schools to run a particular event, and it had a motivational speaker. And I heard the guy give the same shtick every time. And by the fourth time, I was sitting there mouthing all of the words, because I hear it over and over and over again. But guess what? That's what the apostles would have heard from Jesus traveling with him during his ministry. They would have been familiar with his teachings. He gave it in a very poetic, lyrical quality that often included puns to make things memorable. So you have a lot of details together, and it's not just one person, by the way. You have a web of witnesses who preserve these accounts both in a written form and an unwritten form that are able to corroborate one another. And so all of that together, I think, shows that the eyewitness testimony within the early church preserving the life, death, and resurrection of Christ, the earthly ministry of Jesus, is very different from the unreliable forms of eyewitness testimony we call into question today. So I think that could help to sway the doubts that people might have when this is brought up in relation to the reliability of the Gospels.
Benjamin, thanks very much for the question. We got to take our break. We'll take that break and be right back with more patron questions for Trent Horn on Catholic Answers Live.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
One time somebody said to me, "Why don't you air these people?" And I said, "No, because I don't think they're Catholic." He says, "By what right do you have to say that?" I said, "I own the network."
Mother Angelica Live Classics. Every morning, 2 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm going to read the clue one more time for those who maybe just joined us. Maybe there's a chance to still win one of the 5 books that are being given away today at shop.catholic.com. Each day of Christmas, we're reading a clue leading you to a book title at shop.catholic.com, and there are 12 days of Christmas, as you know. If you're one of the first 5 to locate the product and use the attached promo code, you will get it for free. Today's the 9th day of Christmas, 9 ladies dancing. Here's the clue. Red-nosed Rudolph and reindeer glancing at light and jolly 9 ladies dancing. Just use that clue at shop.catholic.com. See if you can get yourself a free book, Red-Nosed Rudolph and Reindeer Glancing at light and jolly 9 ladies dancing. Shop.catholic.com. Trent Horn is our guest. He's the author of a whole bunch of things, and I haven't really mentioned any of his book today, but he wrote the very, very popular book, Why We're Catholic. He wrote a book called Persuasive Pro-Life. He wrote a book called Answering Atheism. And I don't know how many more books. Do you know how many books you've written, Trent? Do you have it in your mind, or do you have to add it up?
I want to say it's like 8 or 9.
Yeah,
I've lost count. So I guess that happens it's like when you have kids. Like, how many kids do I have again? You have to count it up in your head. I'm sure 8 or 9. I just want to get to 13.
Really?
And then after that, I can always just say over a dozen.
Oh,
forever.
yeah, more than a dozen books. Yeah, right.
And then I can just stop, and that's that.
And, of course, you're counting things the saints never said.
Of course I'm counting what the saints never said.
Oh, okay.
Which one day I hope I'll be able to release as a second edition because I've come across other faux-tations, not quotations, but faux, F-A-U-X-tations.
I like it.
That probably the saints ever. There's one from Saint Therese of Lisieux I have seen passed around on the internet, including from some Catholics.
Don't tell me it's the "if this is how you treat your friends" quote.
No, that one's in the book, and I'm skeptical of it.
Okay.
No, it's the one where she says, "I believe in hell and that it is empty." I have not been able to find that in her works. I haven't found other people to say it. And it seems like a very odd thing for St. Therese to believe, because in Story of a Soul, she recounts praying for the conversion of a death row inmate so that he would not go to hell. And she was relieved that when he was executed, he kissed a crucifix. Then that would show that he was repentant.
Oh, yeah.
And that would seem to me that she would have believed that other death row inmates who were not repentant would be damned. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, I wish I'd had that in the book, but I didn't come across it when I was writing it. So I think I'm going to collect more fake saint quotations, and if I have enough of them, it could warrant a second edition for the same 8 people who bought them. Honestly, I should just write it and send it to the 8 people who bought it.
8 people bought that book? You are exaggerating. That's family. That's including family members.
Actually, there are I always am happy though when I come to an event and somebody says, "I actually loved what the Saints never said." I'm like, "Oh, it's so nice to hear."
You were happy the one time a person said that? Okay, that's good. By the way, when you said St. Therese, I confused that with St. Teresa of Avila. But I know who you caught that, Darren, that I was confused? Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I remember that story about St. Therese, the little flower praying for the guy going to his execution. Right. All right, here's another question for you. This one comes from Alex, who is a patron of the Council of Trent Horn's podcast. Thoughts on whether it is sinful to watch movies that contain lots of instances of GD. Certainly not something I'd go out of my way to hear, but should I then never watch certain movies, many of which are considered classics, because they take the Lord's name in vain in this way? Appreciate all of the work you do, Alex.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think when we examine this question, we have to take a step back for a broader question is really in play. And that would be, when is it appropriate to consume media where evil is depicted? So in some case, I mean, if you think about it, in some cases, the evil that's depicted is inferred. Like when you watch a horror movie, people aren't literally being murdered. They're not actually being killed. It's meant to simulate that and make it appear to be that way. But in other films, there is immorality directly being presented, such as someone engaging in sexual immorality or dressing immodestly or showing nudity, for example. That's actually real, what you're seeing in the film, a real depiction of evil. Now, what's interesting is the film might not consider it evil, but it would depend on the context. Now, I am not saying that nudity in and of itself is evil, right? I mean, you look at the Sistine Chapel, there's naked people all over that thing. But you can have cases of sexual immorality presented in films that is not inferred, it's very realistically depicted. And that can be dangerous to the viewer to observe evil that is taking place in artwork, whether it is a film or even things like paintings or even books. Books can be not necessarily good for us. But there isn't a hard and fast rule. And that also includes taking the Lord's name in vain, whether it's using profanities, whether it's a character who is taking the Lord's name in vain. That would be similar, I think, to a character engaging in sexual immorality or nudity. That you have just the evil act is present just right there. You're not culpable. You're not engaging in the act. You're watching another person do it. The question is, when is it appropriate to simulate these acts? So there, it can be. Now, I guess this is hard. Honestly, like, I would not feel comfortable I've done acting in the past. I was part of a acting troupe, the St. Genesius and Vitus Players. I did acting. I personally could not take the Lord's name in vain, even if I was playing a villainous character. But I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong to do that. Sometimes you have to portray someone. Maybe it's historically accurate. This is what the person did and said. It's like Mark Wahlberg in the movie Father Stu, that prior to his conversion, he swore like a sailor, right? He was not the most upstanding moral person, but he was redeemed from that. So whether you're going to watch people simulate evil or present it in a film, it's a personal judgment call, and you'll have to use a variety of standards to determine whether it's appropriate for you to observe these things. Number one, you should look at the state of your own soul and ask yourself a serious question. If in watching this, will I be tempted to evil? Will I be tempted to lust? Will I be tempted to anger? Will I be tempted to take the Lord's name in vain myself? If you have a certain predilection where a movie or an artwork will lead you into that, then you should abstain from it. But everybody's going to have different things that they feel like that they can handle. People are different in that regard. I think also you should look at the artistic value of the work. Is the evil that is presented, is it gratuitous? Is it just for shock value? Or is it for an important artistic purpose? Because there are some movies, Si, that I have watched that contain nudity, but I feel it's done tastefully, and so it's part of a larger good theme. Like, I think there's nudity in Braveheart, for example, but I think Braveheart is a fine movie for a mature individual to watch. So I think having those kinds of scenes, you have to ask, is it gratuitous? There's other films that I've watched, Si, where I've started them, and I've turned them off because I said, no, they're being gratuitous with the nudity or the violence or the swearing. It's not necessary. It's being done for shock value, and it's not good for me to watch that. So I think that to answer Alex's question, seek out a spiritual director, pray, and err on the side of caution in the media you consume, but don't be, scrupulous. Just because there is an act of evil simulated or a character says or does something evil, it doesn't follow that we absolutely can't watch it. You'll have to use your judgment in accord with those particular standards that I would recommend. I don't know, Si, do you have anything to add to that, or what do you think?
Well, it's interesting. I was interested as I don't know that I have anything to add to it except to say this, that when you talked about Father Stu, when I came out of the movie Father Stu, there was one person who complained about the language of it, and I saw it with a bunch of Catholic leaders. It was kind of they invite you to the pre-screening, so you'll say nice things about it. And I was really willing to say nice things about it because I thought it was fantastic. I thought Mark Wahlberg did something great, and I thought the director was wonderful. But then the other day here in the studio, we were talking about that a lot of people voted for it for the Catholic movie of the year, and we didn't agree in the studio. Between me, Todd, and Tim Ryland, we disagree. I was not offended or moved in any way by the language. It just seemed like that's the way people talk. Fine, put it in a movie. It didn't, but a lot of people were really upset that Father Stu was this Catholic movie that had a lot of nasty language in it.
Well, it had a lot. I think that's why they're re-releasing it as a PG-13 film, and I think they have to take out like 70 uses of profanity, every use of the Lord's name in vain. And so, what's interesting, Si, is I might agree with you, but like if I had a 13-year-old, I might show it to them. I might not think they're mature enough for that, where I would want them to have a version that doesn't have as much problematic elements in it. Though, what is funny, actually, on that point, Laura just interviewed Mark Wahlberg for her channel, and they kind of got into it about that point.
Okay. So you just turned this into a promotion of Laura's podcast. It's not even sneaky the way you do it. You just do it. You don't even care.
Now, for those who are going to go to her podcast to find the Mark Wahlberg interview, I need to put quotations around the word interview. It's 90 seconds long. It's a funny bit. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. So.
All right. Well, I don't know. I kind of. Do you ever get this where somebody says something to you and you go, am I missing an important moral element here? Like, you have to kind of question yourself. Like, is this? Because I did not. I don't know how you felt, Edgar. Because didn't we see it together? We saw it with Carlo, and I just didn't have any reaction to the language. It didn't mean anything to me. I just thought they were depicting the life of this person and did so in a beautiful way. But it really bugged other people.
Well, and that's why I said in my response to Alex that it's going to be up to a personal preference. Some people. They try really hard to not swear, for example, to not be profane.
Yeah.
And so this can be something that is tempting to them and puts that in their mind when they wish it wouldn't. Just the same as some people can observe nudity and appreciate the aesthetics and the art, like a Botticelli painting or a Michelangelo with a nude figure. There are others that just can't look at that because that's a big stumbling block for them. And I think that we just should not judge others who require more. We don't want to be. We want to carry one another's burdens, as Paul says in Galatians 6:2.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And we don't want to be stumbling blocks to other people. It's why if you have a friend who's an alcoholic, if you can drink fine, you may not go out to a bar with him, because even though you might not struggle with it, you don't want to put him in a position where he does. And that's something else you have to keep in mind when you consume media. It's not just about you, your children, others who are around you. What can be helpful for them as well.
Yeah. So you're saying be considerate of other people and care about them, even if they're vegans.
Even
All right.
so.
Wait, I don't think you said anything about that. I guess maybe that's just my pet peeve.
If they're an alcoholic vegan, don't eat a beer-soaked steak.
Oh, that does sound delicious, though. Be right back with more Trent Horn, Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
The recent decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade was a monumental victory for the pro-life movement. But the fight is far from over. With our new booklet, Why We're Pro-Life, we have produced the perfect tool to prepare you to have peaceful and convincing conversations to shed light on the truth about human life from conception to natural death. Catholic Answers is printing millions of copies of this booklet, and we plan simply to give them away. You can help us in two ways. First, by generously supporting this project. 25 cents prints one book. $2,500 prints 10,000, and so on. Second, by helping us distribute the booklet through your parish, your school, or the pro-life ministry you work with. Catholic Answers is going to blanket the country with why we're pro-life, but only if you step up and help us. Thank you so much. For more information, visit whyweareprolife.com.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
What is happening right now? I love it. A little bit of groovy music out of nowhere, celebrating the 9th day of Christmas with a little bit of groovy music for Trent Horn, who never gets the groovy music. Trent Horn has probably never even heard that music before. Have you heard that? Have we ever done groovy music with you before, Trent?
I think I have. It feels like a very 1960s, gonna do the swim and grab my surfboard and run out onto the fake beach at the studio.
With Gidget. Yeah.
With Gidget, of course.
Now I forgot where we were because we were talking about we were talking about Laura Horn saying funny things at the break. And now, am I on a new question? Am I on a question 11? Somebody help me. I'm completely lost in the midst of the 9th day of Christmas here, and I haven't even had any eggnog yet today.
I think we are.
I think it's number 11?
Number 11.
All right, I remember where we are now. Again, we're doing the patron questions.
Yep.
These are patrons of Trent's podcast, the Council of Trent, and you can find it at TrentHornPodcast.com. And his patrons get to ask questions for this big show because they're patrons of the show, of his show, and I think that's a great thing. And this one comes from Benjamin. I don't know if it's the same Benjamin as we had before, but this one comes from Benjamin. Some atheists claim the biggest evidence that God doesn't exist is the self-contradictory nature of the definition of God that I most commonly hear from apologists. God is supposedly a timeless, spaceless, disembodied mind. To say that something exists is to say that it has location in space-time or is space-time itself. How would you respond, Benjamin?
Well, I would say that this is not a contradiction in saying that God is timeless, spaceless. I wouldn't call God a disembodied mind. God doesn't have a mind like you or I, but I would say God is immaterial. God is pure intellect. He is just knowledge and truth itself. But God is not bound by, he is not in time or space. He transcends these things. He has causal power over everything within space and time, but he exists beyond space and time. He does not. God does not have, in his divine nature, does not have a spatial or a temporal location. Now he does. The second person of the Trinity does in virtue of the incarnation, but God in his divine nature does not. So this is not a contradiction. This is just the argument. The argument seems to be going like this. In order to exist, a thing must have a location in space and time or be space-time itself. God does not have a location in space and time. Therefore, and God is not space-time itself. We're not pantheists. Therefore, God does not exist. And I would say that's a valid argument, but it's not a sound one because I can doubt the first premise. Why should I believe that in order for something to exist, it must have a location in space and time? Why should I believe that? And I could just, to defeat that premise, I could offer a few counterexamples. So,
fairness.
Right. So what? Right. So one example might be, what about subatomic particles like electrons? When you study things like quantum physics, when you normally, when we read a textbook, right, and it shows us an atom, it looks like little balls connected by little pipes, and they're circling. It looks like a little solar system, right? The atom. You think about the atomic symbol. It looks like a mini solar system with the electron planets orbiting the nucleus sun. But atoms don't actually look like that in real life. In real life, you have the nucleus, and then you have what chemists and physicists would call an electron cloud of where the electrons are. But because of something called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, if you study these subatomic particles, you can't ever get their exact location and velocity at the same time. They always exist in a kind of probability until something like the waveform is collapsed. I don't want to get too deep into quantum physics, but I would say that this kind of definition you could say electrons or quarks or subatomic particles don't exist. They don't have a precise spatial location. Another example would be universals. So we have, for example, I have a green can here, and there's green grass. They all seem to have something in common that is objectively real, the color green. But then my question is, does green exist? Is green a real thing, or is it something we invented? It's a name we give to things. Well, it's kind of weird if we invented it, because it seems like we are actually locating a real thing that exists, but green would still be a real thing even if you destroyed every green object. Green would still have it would still be a real concept, a real thing. Well, that leads us to the philosophical idea of universals, that there are these universals that exist that are embodied in concrete things. So it's similar also to numbers, right? Do numbers exist or did we invent them? Well, if we invented them, that's kind of weird because numbers work the same way across the universe, across cultures, time and space. There seems to be a lot of mathematicians hold that numbers have a real existence. So when we talk about 2 + 2 = 4, we're not referring to... Now, we did invent numerals, right? You have the numeral Roman 2, the Arabic 2. We invented numerals, but not the number itself. So universals, numbers, these abstract objects, it's at least debated among philosophers whether they exist, but it certainly casts doubt on the idea a thing must exist within space and time in order to have real existence. A final example I would give would be consciousness, right? Do I exist, right? I could put it this way. Do my conscious thoughts exist? I'd say, yeah, they do. But where are they? It doesn't seem like you can't really isolate them just to one particular part of the brain. Even if you did, that part of the brain, like if you had those little clump of neurons, that's not identical to my thoughts. My thoughts have properties the neurons don't. My thoughts are about something. They have aboutness. They have intentionality. A clump of neurons is not about anything. So that is not identical. to my thoughts. I have not located my thoughts. I've located something necessary for my thoughts to exist, but it seems like my thoughts don't have a purely spatial location. So that's when I would go against this argument, I would say that it's a dubious premise. It's a very materialistic premise to say something can only exist unless it's within space and time. Why should I believe that? What about parallel universes? They're not in our space-time, but they still exist, causally disconnected from us. So I would say that this argument against God, I don't think it gets off the ground.
Benjamin, thanks for the question, though. It's a great question. All the questions today coming from Trent Horn's patrons at his podcast, The Council of Trent. And the next one comes from Miomowski. Miomowski. I'm sorry, I really wanted to do that good, but I did it bad. Miomowski, I'm sorry.
Quit while you're behind, Si. Let's just quit while you're behind.
I'm going to keep going until it sounds like a thing, because it doesn't sound like I'm doing it right. Miomowski. Okay, that sounded right.
Sounds like you're. It sounds like you're doing that one commercial.
Meow 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 meow
meow meow meow meow meow meow.
Poor Miomowski has probably gotten that his or her entire life, and that you just did it again. What are your thoughts on Twitter? Keep it or leave it? That's a good question.
Oh, goodness. I've struggled with this as of late. I do think Twitter, I have a lot of reasons to leave, but I'm going to be honest with you, Si. I'm kind of unhappy and unfulfilled. The relationship I have with Twitter, we've been together since 2009. I'm not happy, but I'm gonna stay for the kids. I'm gonna at least stay for the kids. I think it's important for them that I be there.
I don't think that's.
Well, no. I will be honest with you.
Yeah.
I don't particularly enjoy Twitter. I know it's not a great place to be, but I have thoroughly enjoyed over the years giving away my books to people through Twitter, and some people have converted through that.
Oh, well.
And so for me, then it's worth it. Like, I'll find someone, they're just out in the internet. I'm thinking of becoming Catholic. And I say, hey, can I send you my book? And I would have never met this person otherwise. So for me, that will always keep me there in some form. I may stop posting, I may stop interacting, but I'll keep looking. So I think in general, you need to weigh the costs. And if it is sucking up, your time is a valuable thing. It's funny, Elon Musk has way more money than I do, but he and I have the same amount of time every week. And we can choose to spend it wisely or unwisely. And I think Twitter and social media, you can end up spending it unwisely. You can be uncharitable, get into flame wars and thread wars with people. I get tempted by that often. The other day, I saw someone post something ridiculous criticizing Archbishop Cordileone. And I thought about responding. But I thought, I don't want to get sucked into all this right now. There must be a more productive way that I could do that. And, I'm still trying to think of a way to do that at some point. So in general, I think you need to evaluate your reasons. Unless you can find a really, really good one like I have. I'm not saying you have to leave it, but I can see how it's justified. Just be a good steward of your time and don't be in a situation that puts you in a near occasion of sin. Whether it's a sin, especially with Twitter, it can be a sin to anger, a sin to gossip, a sin to sloth and laziness. Even I myself, it's good, but I find myself wasting time. Mm-hmm. I don't tweet a lot, but I use Twitter. It's hard. I use it to see what's happening, so that helps me in my work, to see what's new and what's happening among different groups and people. But I can also get sucked into a time suck, wasting my time on frivolities and trivialities. Trivialities and frivolities.
Yeah.
That I do not want to, that I don't want to do. So each person has to assess that. But I think the evidence, I think the tilt would be against, unless you had a good reason to stay. But you don't have a moral. I'm not saying you have to, but when I look at all of it, I don't think it's been necessarily good for people in general.
Miomowski said just your thoughts. So those are your thoughts.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Well, like he said keep it or leave it. That could mean me keep it or leave it, or other people.
Yeah. Right. No, what I'm saying, you weren't making a moral declaration there that you have to leave.
Yeah. No, those are my thoughts. Just like I see a lot of the harm. There can be good, but you have to really fight for it. And I don't know.
I stopped doing Twitter because several times I almost hit a pedestrian while I was tweeting. And I think it's dangerous. You know what I'm saying? I feel like Let's take a break.
Now, what if you're like now I'm just on TikTok and I don't even notice if I hit anybody.
No, yeah, I don't. But the Chinese know. All right, we'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on, Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
He was a 10th century saint, priest, mystic, and doctor of the church, honored as the first poet of Armenia.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
Gregory of Narek is revered by Armenians as a watchful angel in human form. His masterwork, the Book of Lamentations, was intended to be his last testament, an encyclopedia of prayer for all nations. He was named a Doctor of the Church in 2015.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live on this 9th day of Christmas. Merry Christmas to you. I hope you're having a wonderful season. And Trent Horn is our guest for this episode, and we're taking questions from his patrons. This one comes from Jackson. Jackson asks the following, Trent. Hi, Trent. In your video, The One Question Transgender Advocates Can't Answer, you define a woman as someone who is ordered towards gestation. A med student friend challenged me by bringing up the case of someone who has complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. In the case he mentioned, the person appears female and was raised as a female despite having male chromosomes. Under your definition, it seems the person would be a man since they are naturally ordered to impregnation despite having female sex characteristics. I hope you understand this, Trent. This is difficult on an emotional level since the person was raised as a woman, appears to be a woman, and in some cases even gets married to a man, invalidly, I assume, before finding out about their disorder. What do you make of this case?
Right. So I think that whenever we propose a definition, there are always going to be borderline cases where we're not sure if the definition applies, but the hard cases don't invalidate the general rule. An analogy I often use is with brain death. Like, what does it mean if somebody is alive? And normally we talk about having electrical activity in the brain using the total brain death criteria. But there are cases involving the complete cessation of electrical activity in the brain where the body still seems to be alive. It's not decomposing. It can still metabolize energy, digest food, things like that. But just because there are some of those borderline cases, it doesn't mean we're incapable. It doesn't mean that life and death, we have to reject the life-death binary, for example, or that life and death are just subjective concepts. Similar to being a man or a woman, that there are cases that we might call that fall under the rubric of intersex cases. So intersex would be individuals that have genetic makeups and biological makeups, genotypes and phenotypes from both sexes. The older term for that was hermaphrodites. Now we would use the term intersex to describe this. And there are cases, though, even in the vast, so 99.9% of people who identify as transgender, they are not intersex. It's very clear whether they are a biological man or woman, a male or female. And even among intersex cases, you can still determine this. You have intersex cases caused by chromosomal abnormalities. That would be, for example, the sex chromosomes. If you have only one X, you would have 45 chromosomes, but you would be a female, but with stunted female development of female secondary sex characteristics, things like that. If you're XYY, if you're XXY, you are a male, 47 chromosomes, Klinefelter syndrome, a male with stunted secondary sexual sex characteristics. So those would be intersex conditions caused by chromosomal abnormalities. And other kinds of intersex conditions can develop because of hormonal developmental abnormalities. And this would be the case of androgen insensitivity syndrome. This can occur partially or in a complete way. Partial androgen insensitivity syndrome and complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. And that relates to the body's ability to respond to hormones like testosterone or androgens that would stimulate the development of secondary sex characteristics. So the case being described would be a genetic male, XY, who does not respond. Complete androgen sensitivity syndrome means they don't respond to testosterone at all. So they don't develop male organs. They lack male reproductive organs, but they would also lack internal female reproductive organs. They would not have a uterus. They would not have an ova. They may not know this until reaching puberty and discovering that thinking they're a woman and then not menstruating because they don't have a uterus, actually. And they actually they have very incomplete female genital organs. While their secondary sex characteristics like hair growth, body shape may look feminine, they would not be a female member of the human species. And so what I would say is that when we have these cases, once again, the unusual cases don't negate the norm. We have to be compassionate with people who have developmental difficulties. And there may be cases where doctors disagree about, especially if we have both a genetic and a hormonal abnormality, it might be very hard to make a determination in those very, very rare cases. But in the case that's being described here, I would say that we have a male who unfortunately highly resembles the female member of the species. And that is a very difficult cross to bear. But it doesn't make this individual female just because almost anyone looking at this person would think that they're female. To give you, I'll give you an analogy here. There is a woman named Shauna Ray who was featured on the Learning Channel, although I think it's now called TLC because you don't do a lot of learning anymore on the Learning Channel. And so Shauna Ray is in her 20s, but she looks like an 8-year-old girl. So she's 3'10". She appears, from all intents and purposes, looking at her, she appears to be 8 years old. She looks just like an 8-year-old, but we should not treat her like an 8-year-old. She is a 22, 23-year-old woman and should be treated as such and understood in that way, regardless of how she looks, because we have objective ways of determining her actual age. And I think that's while we should be compassionate in this situation, we can apply that to these other cases of things like complete androgen insensitivity syndrome and other things like that. So, but I hope that is helpful. For those who have more questions, if you have like a really nitty gritty, like a case where I've heard about this, I'm not sure what should be done, or this is happening at our hospital, we don't know what the best form of treatment would be, I'd recommend the National Catholic Bioethics Center, and they can provide good recommendations if you have or know someone who has a difficult intersex case.
Jackson, great question. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to keep moving, try to get as many patron questions on as I can with Trent before we have to go. Nathan, a patron of Trent Horn's podcast, asks this: how is your research going on the morality of eating meat? I'm really keen to hear your view on the matter. I'm vegetarian and a fan of Charlie Camosi's work with his application of the consistent life ethic on animals. Have you engaged with his work?
Now, I'm familiar with Charles Camosi. I guess we'll call him Charles. I always thought his name was Charles, but I'm familiar with Camosi's work, and I do very much appreciate it. I think he was involved with the American Solidarity Party, the Catholic Solidarity Party, not too long ago. And I like a lot of his work. I don't agree with all of it, but I like the tone that he takes, and he's very thoughtful. But I'm not familiar with. I'm familiar more with stuff he's raised with the previous elections about what Catholics should do, electing people, things like that. I'm not familiar with his work on animals. Now, my view on the morality of eating meat, and the church would follow this as well, is that it is not evil in and of itself to eat meat. I mean, the Bible is very clear. God says to Peter, "Rise and eat. These animals are not unclean to you." I don't see anything immoral with eating meat per se. Where I get more concerned and have done more research is the question of so-called factory farming, or the question of industrial food production. The question would be, is it immoral to produce food through industrial food production, given the suffering it causes animals? Is it unjust to inflict that kind of suffering? And then is it immoral to, even if you do think it's unjust, is it immoral to cooperate with these practices, even if they are immoral? Do you have a good reason for doing that? And here, I haven't reached a firm conclusion, but I think I'm leaning towards the view that there is enough justification for in modern day industrial food production, given one, the intrinsic dignity of human life and the need to provide for human beings, that if you did not have that, you would, because even if you switch to vegan and vegetarian, let's say you switched it over to vegan and vegetarian kinds of industrial food production, you would still end up killing many animals by displacing croplands. You would still end up causing harm and suffering to animals in all the amounts of agricultural land you would need to supplement the meat. But I think that non-human animals were created to glorify God and to serve human beings. And so I think what that means then is that we should not be cruel to them, and that the primary wrong in being cruel to animals is ultimately what it does to the human soul, what it does to human beings in deforming a soul made in the image of God that will have an eternal existence, either with God or apart from God. So I've looked at other philosophers who are critical of these anti-industrial food production arguments, and I think their arguments have a lot of strength. I haven't fully resolved the issue yet, and I completely respect Catholics who believe it is unjust to cooperate with this kind of food production. Another reason I would have for still using it is what's called the causal impotence objection, in that it would cause a lot of difficulty and strain on my life to, let's say, give up this certain kind of food without any kind of corresponding benefit, because the production will still happen anyways. And if I were to do that, where would it stop? Do I not have any cell phones because the rare earth metals in them were mined by slave labor? So much of what we do is entangled with ethically questionable or unethical practices, where we end up remotely cooperating with evil, where we shouldn't directly cooperate or formally cooperate with it. So yeah, sorry for the rambling there, but I'm interested in it, but I lean towards that it can be justified for several reasons. However, I think that Catholics should take the issue seriously and not just be glib and say animals don't matter or say it doesn't matter, because animals are sentient. They're God gave them to us. The church teaches we're to be good stewards. I personally try to get a lot of my meat from local farmers. Once a year I basically buy a cow and I keep it in a freezer. Well, it's dead. It's cut up. But the cow is slaughtered humanely. I don't just keep a full cow in my freezer, obviously, but slaughtered humanely and then just put in the freezer. So it's so I'm working through it, I guess. If that's helpful.
I don't even know what to say. I'm glad to hear you don't keep a live cow in your freezer. Let me just say
he wouldn't be live for very long.
No, that would not be a very. Dylan wanted to know what's your favorite color. Are you going to answer Dylan before we go, or because you have 1 second?
I think it's red. Maybe it's because I always like the Flash as a superhero, but I think a nice slick red is always nice. But when I'm kind of too amped up, I need a calming blue. Red or blue.
Red or blue.
Maybe throw some white in there, and then we got the nice
Oh my
mixture.
gosh, what a patriotic color palette you have. What a patriotic color palette.
It's just Christmas. You got red and white.
I got my red and white here because it's still Christmas. It's the 9th day of Christmas. That's right. Trent Horn, TrentHornPodcast.com is where you can find his podcasts. Trent, thanks. It's always just great to get to have time with you on the air.
You too, Si.
And tell Laura she's doing great work over at Too Far with Laura Horn. That'll do it for us. We'll see you next time. God willing, right here, Catholic Answers Live.